All right, late last evening at 9:21, Caldwell Police sent an email to our newsroom. The point of the press release was to let us know one of their officers was in the hospital after an exposure to fentanyl during arrest. The officer was responding to a shoplifting call, and during the search of the 22-year-old suspect, Caldwell Police explained that the officer, quote, located fentanyl in both pill and powder form. He supposedly took the synthetic opioid as evidence, and as he drove the suspect to the Canyon County Jail, the officer began to, quote, experience dramatic symptoms of fentanyl exposure, including losing consciousness. So the officer pulled over, called for medical help, and then gave himself a dose of Narcan, the over-the-counter nasal spray version of naloxone. It's used to treat drug overdoses. So several things got our attention when we got this email. One was this idea a short-term exposure to fentanyl was enough to cause an overdose. Two, that while in the throes of said overdose, the officer was able to give himself the antidote to stop the effects of the exposure. And three was what Caldwell Police Chief Rex Ingram said in the last paragraph of that press release from last night. Today, our officer cheated death and had the wherewithal to take immediate action when he stopped his car, requested help, and administered Narcan to himself. I'm proud of him for his actions and his split-second decision-making during this life and death situation, which saved lives, he said. So those statements jumped out to us, mostly because we have seen and we have shown several stories addressing this kind of thing. And while there's no doubt or argument against fentanyl being extremely dangerous and even deadly, we know it's 50 times more potent than heroin, there's a lot of doubt as to whether simply touching fentanyl or even breathing it in can be enough to put someone into an overdose. It's a topic that's been studied and reported on for years, and we weren't the only ones who noticed this, by the way. Several people on social media called out the contradictory conclusion of the Caldwell Police, including one of the leading experts on this topic. Dr. Ryan Marino tweeted our story last night and highlighted out the facts of the press release. Well, they didn't really add up. Before that story went live on our website, we reached out to Caldwell Police to ask if they were sure this is what happened. The response, quote, yes, doctor said exposure, he touched it, not airborne. Dr. Marino told Joe Paris, it doesn't seem likely.
Caldwell Police putting out information about an officer overdosing because of exposure to fentanyl, it led to Idaho's medical community asking some questions. Sure, it's a serious situation and one that sounds very dangerous. However, doctors say it also sounds very, very implausible.
Law enforcement faces a lot of risks and encounters a lot of dangers on the job. And this is one area where they don't have to worry.
Dr. Ryan Marino is a medical toxologist at Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine. He focuses work on the science and realities of fentanyl exposure. He's looked into claims across the country of law enforcement being exposed to fentanyl and then having drastic reactions. He says the science just doesn't support the stories.
So I can only speculate, and I don't want to try to diagnose someone with something. What I can say definitively is that in this story and every other story like this is not a fentanyl overdose. You cannot give yourself Narcan if you are experiencing a fentanyl overdose.
Marino and other experts maintain just touching fentanyl in powder or pill form won't create an opioid overdose. Even ingested another way, Dr. Marino says it would take a significant amount.
You would have to be in a wind tunnel with wind tunnel conditions and dunes of tens of thousands, if not millions of dollars of fentanyl powder for it to accidentally be inhaled.
To be very clear, Dr. Marino says the reactions officers report having may be authentic. They just aren't fentanyl overdose reactions.
Something that would be consistent with these kind of symptoms would be like anxiety reaction or kind of a panic attack, probably based on significant fear about this risk. And there's something else called the nocebo effect, which is like the negative side of the placebo effect. So if you believe strongly enough that something can harm you, you will have real symptoms. And I do want to be clear that I believe these are real symptoms. I don't want to say that anyone is faking anything. It just is not a fentanyl overdose, and it is not scientifically possible to experiencing an overdose this way.
Dr. Marino says he continues to speak out on stories like the Caldwell one because he has found that they are impacting first responders around the country.
I have seen personally where people do not want to respond to someone who is having a real overdose because they're worried that if they get close and touch them, they will have this secondhand exposure overdose themselves. And so we have never seen that happen, but I'm worried about the kind of downstream consequences that this misinformation has. If you want to do your own fact checking, I mean, every specialty organization with relevant expertise in medical toxicology, emergency medicine, clinical toxicology, pharmacology, backs up what I'm saying here and points to the same scientific data that goes back years and years.
So at just past 5 o'clock here on Tuesday, we are still waiting some responses from the Caldwell Police Department. We sent them a list of questions. And to be very blunt here, Brian, we're not trying to be hypercritical of local law enforcement, but there are some things that are being put out in this story that just factually, according to the experts, is not true. And as you heard Dr. Marino talk about, the fear is that first responders here in Idaho or around the country would be unwilling to respond to legitimate opioid overdoses because of a fear that if they're too close to someone or they're too close to a bag of pills, that they themselves would go into overdose. Again, I spoke with local experts on the phone today. Of course, you saw the interview. The doctors that I've spoke with and really the research you read online maintain simple touch or simple exposure to fentanyl is not something that'll put you into an overdose.
And so, again, as you mentioned, we're still waiting to hear back from Caldwell Police about this because we sent these questions to them, especially when it comes like to the suspect who obviously was exposed to the same fentanyl that the police officer was exposed to. The suspect was arrested, sent to jail. The police officer, as of last night, was still in the hospital. So we'll see. When we get those answers, we will pass them along to you, but several questions still remain unanswered. Thank you very much, Joe.